I don't know what you're doing.
I will.
Good morning.
Good morning, Erin.
I know we still have a few minutes.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning, it's Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Erin, I just shot you over an email
Yep.
about the 50-minute. Great.
Yep, already replied and on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh.
So Erin, we have 3 members so far. We need at least 2 more to join.
Okay, thanks, Rhonda.
Good. Now I need 1 more. And
And I see Dave logging in. Does that give us number 5?
yes.
All right. Do we wait officially till 10 o'clock? So we're not like in violation of some kind of meetings rule? No.
I would.
Okay. Good thing I asked.
Yeah. But it's nice to have quorum before the meeting starts.
Yep. Okay, my clock is showing 10 o'clock. So I am going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Y'all thought you were done with me. Oh, now it missed my funny comment. And so I am leading the meeting today, maybe for the last time, we'll see. So welcome, everybody. Happy almost school year starting. Hope everybody's doing well and staying healthy. We are going to just jump right into roll call with Rhonda.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the TAC. Let me get my video on here. Okay, so Coconino County, Lucinda Andriani and Christopher Tressler are both excused. They are at a similar event. Coconino County Citizen Representative Jillian Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. City of Flagstaff, Jeff Bowman. He just joined us.
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. City of Flagstaff Citizen Representative Kevin Parks.
Morning and present.
Good morning. Metro Plan Dave Wessel.
I'm here. Good morning.
Morning. NAU Aaron Stom.
Here.
Thank you, Aaron. NAU student Maylee Acosta is not able to be with us today. She's excused. CCC Kurt Stull.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. And our economic development representative, Gail Jackson, is expected but not with us yet. So I'll try to let you know when she joins. And I will turn it back to you, Erin. Thank you.
Thank you. And so pitch hitting in our safety minute today for Sam, who is out, is Heather.
Good morning, members of our Transit Advisory Committee. Welcome back. It's nice to have you all here as we kick off our new fiscal year. So Sam walked in and handed this to me 5 minutes ago. So forgive me for reading his very well-developed narrative. August Safety Minute is focused on flash flooding. Flash flood waters move at very fast speeds and can roll boulders, tear out trees, destroy buildings, and decimate bridges. Walls of water can reach heights of 10 to 20 feet and generally are accompanied by a deadly cargo of debris. We've seen that in our community most recently. Here are some safety measures you can use to stay safe during flood events. Stay informed about flooding conditions in your area and sign up for local emergency alerts. When notified of flash flood warning in your area, evacuate immediately if told to do so. If you cannot do that, shelter in place. Do not try to walk or drive through a flooded area. If you are in a vehicle, the depth of water can be deceiving and even a small amount of water can move your vehicle downstream. The safety rules you should practice during a flood listed here are meant to help you stay safe during this type of natural disaster. Your first priority should always be getting yourself and your loved ones to a safe location away from the flooded area. While it may be tempting to try to rescue cherished possessions before fleeing, this can often be a mistake. You can always replace stuff, but a life can never be recovered after the floodwaters subside. And with that, that is our safety minute from Sam today. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Heather. And thanks, Sam, for us. Yeah, I hope everybody here, I hope your homes and everything were okay during these recent floods. Next up is the approval of our TAC minutes from June 3rd. First, just to open it up, if there were any comments, questions, or concerns about the minutes. And I am going to watch for hands, but if I don't, just feel free to speak if there's an opening. I am not hearing or seeing any hands. Can I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. This is Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Can I get a second?
Second, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are passed. Thank you, everybody. Jumping right into our agenda, most importantly, we need a new vice chair for TAC. And so I'd like to just kind of open it up and see if anybody is willing to. So just a reminder, you would serve, and Rhonda or Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, you would serve in a 2-year term, the first year as vice chair, and the second year you would move up to the chair position. I have served in both. I will again say to everybody, it's one of the easiest jobs I've ever had, because between Rhonda and Heather, they get all the information prepared. They tell me what I need to do. And I literally sit here like one of those monkeys with the presenting the information that they have provided. You already attend the meetings. It's pretty easy. And so I'm going to open it up and see if anybody is willing to. Typically it would be, people often do a self-nomination, although every once in a while, somebody will nominate one of their colleagues. So.
Excuse me, Erin, Gail has joined us.
Hi, Gail.
Good morning.
We are just chatting about, I don't know how much you heard, if you're able to hear everything about, we are looking for someone to serve as vice chair. And so it would be a 2-year commitment, the first year as vice chair and the second as chair. And I shared that these are very easy positions, leading the meetings. We already all attend the meetings. And honestly, the Mountain Lion staff pull everything together. So it's really just about leading the meeting. So looking for somebody to nominate themselves or another. And just so folks know, I have already, I don't know, 6, maybe 8 years total, at least 6. So I would like to not feel compelled due to the silence of jumping in there again. I'd like to take a little bit of a back seat if that's okay with folks. So if I could get somebody to just be willing to step up, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, this is Dave, and I apparently everybody's stuck on mute. You know, these virtual meetings are really tough. I was able to figure it out, so I'll go ahead and self-nominate.
Thank you, Dave. And Dave has served at least, was it 2 years, Dave?
At least.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in there? Don't be shy. Okay, this would be a vote. So do we need to have a nomination and then a second? I'm looking for the rules.
Since he's self-nominated, there should probably be a second.
Okay, can I get a second?
I'll second that, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. And then just a vote. All those in favor of Dave Wessel as vice chair, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, congratulations, Dave. Dave, thank you. And I am going to continue to encourage people to step up. It can sometimes get a little bit tiring when it's the same people over and over again stepping up. And so I would ask folks, and I understand that for a lot of you guys, you're appointed as part of the group that you're with, and maybe you don't think it, maybe it's not going to be you the next year, but I'm wondering if maybe Rhonda and Heather, we need to look at it at the position being part of the position for that member, so that if the member changes, it would actually just go to who's ever representing, whether it's NAU or CCC or whoever it would be. Maybe we could look at that this year so that people are inclined to, maybe, I don't know if people are hesitant because they're not sure if they will be here for 2 years because of how their place at this table comes to be. So maybe we would look at something like that, a conversation with this group, and if that would work better. But we definitely need to get to a place where we've got more people willing to step up. So, all right, enough of that. Are we all good on that one? Okay. Review of draft board agenda items. So some of these things, we don't do the presentations for these because these are really for the board, but they're looking to adopt the updated personnel policy manual, right? No presentations for these first two, correct? Thank you, Heather. I'm watching your head, just so you know. And the other item so if there's any questions, the other one is adopting Mountain Lion's updated equal employment opportunity program and workforce goals. Does anybody have questions on either of these items? And just a reminder for folks that maybe are newer, although I don't know that there's much that are newer, packets go out in advance so that we can read through items, so that for many things that are not presentations, if there is a question or a concern or even a comment, that you guys can raise it here, but it actually allows us to be much more efficient with our time during these meetings. So hearing no comments or questions, we'll move into our discussion action items. It is a short list today, folks. And so our first presenter today is going to be Busy Collins on the Flagstaff in Motion program.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the TAC, I'm just putting my desk up. So sorry for the background sound. Next slide, please, Rhonda. So today I'll be presenting draft recommendations on 2 aspects of Flagstaff in Motion, peer agencies, and goals, objectives, and performance measures. I welcome questions throughout, comments. I am seeking feedback for any changes or additions needed. This was presented internally to Mountain Lion And it's definitely an iterative process. So going through the steps, but looking for any feedback you might have. Next slide, please. So peer agencies are helpful to define what success looks like, to rate our performance against similar agencies, and for information sharing on practices, policies, and funding sources that Mountain Line could replicate. And for Flagstaff in Motion, a variety of peer agencies will be identified to reflect the unique aspects of Flagstaff and Mountain Line public transit. So staff is seeking your feedback on metrics and also on transit agencies to include. Maybe you've experienced an exceptional agency somewhere, or said, you know, come across a city and transit agency that just did it right. So looking for any suggestions. Something to note is that not all agencies will be a match for all categories that we're looking to measure, but we just want to make sure that important categories are all covered by at least a couple transit agencies, ideally, if possible. And so Mountain Line has used a variety of different peers for different projects, and some may be useful for this project. So pictured here is the last 5-year plan. We did have some peer agencies identified. That plan really focused on increasing ridership. And so as you can see, the metrics, it's really small. I mean, the only metric you can pictured here is the boardings per revenue hour, but peers were identified based on ridership metrics. And so here's a variety of peers who had similar boardings per hour to Flagstaff that we could look at. And 2 are underlined, the Bloomington Normal and Missoula, and those will be recommended in a later slide. I just wanted to point that out, that yeah, there's 2 that are underlined, and what does that mean? Next slide, please, Rhonda. And here is the transit guidelines report, peer agencies. And the purpose of the transit guidelines was to better integrate transit into the development process. And so peer agencies like MUTD and Connect Transit were selected based on their similarities to Mountain Line, while transit agencies such as GVTA and PTA of Perth were selected as aspirational examples. So the most relevant peer cities for each transit guideline element were considered here. So this is kind of interesting, and I tried to point out Mountain Line's metrics called out in orange here, just so you can see how we compare with other agencies. Next slide, please, Rhonda. And Mountain Line was actually selected as a peer agency in a study conducted by Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council in Bend, Oregon. And they were looking at successful agencies that tackled some of their challenges, such as increasing fixed route ridership. So you can see, passengers per hour, that last metric in that table. And also increasing costs of paratransit service. They were really interested in that part of our service that they struggle with, that some other people struggle with. And I think everybody has, increasing paratransit is a very costly service, necessary but costly service. And so how can we mitigate those costs? I think everybody's trying to look for some solutions, and we're doing okay compared to others. Next slide, please, Rhonda. And staff thought that it's important to include agencies that don't receive state funding to transit to understand innovative funding mechanisms that we could replicate. And so here's a few examples. So Texas, Idaho, Alabama, a few agencies there. And we did identify, let's see, 2 of them, SunTrans and City Bus Lubbock, were selected. And if you go to the next slide, please, Rhonda. This is the recommended peer agencies that we're starting with. So I'd be happy to go back to other slides, but so there's some example metrics on the left. So service area population, and I know it's just an X. We have all of that data, identified, but just, is it similar is kind of the X for us. Ridership, again, there's a couple that match up with ridership, fare revenue, that's always helpful. Passengers per hour. We really wanted to look at other places that have a university or a college. We think that's a big part of the Flagstaff transit system and important for our agency to look at. So there's the state funding, does not receive state funding. Paratransit service, again, while we're doing things okay, we're always looking to improve our cost on paratransit services. So I think that's an important metric for us. We're also curious about other places that have microtransit or on-demand service. So there's a few that do that. And so I won't read through the rest, but I'll pause here. This is the end of my peer agencies portion. I will have another goals, objectives, and performance measures, but looking for any feedback you might have.
Thanks, Busy. Any feedback for Busy yet? Dave.
Yeah, good morning, Busy. How you doing?
Good morning, Dave. Well, thank you.
Good, good. So, in looking at this table, at first blush, it's like, oh yeah, it all makes sense, but then it might need a little explanation. So I see ridership. Everybody has ridership, right? So why are there X's in only 3 of these columns?
Mm-hmm. So the X indicates that it's similar to our ridership levels.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So that's where they have its similarity. Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Jeff.
Thank you. Hey, Busy, I have maybe 2 questions. One was, and maybe I should already know, why is fair? Can you tell me more about fair revenue and why only one of these matches up with what we do here?
Absolutely. So I'm looking at the notes that they had sent. So 2019 fair revenue of Bloomington Normal, which has the X indicated here. Their fair revenue was above 1 million, which is about what Mountain Line gets annually as well from our farebox revenue. And I think it's important, understanding maybe that's an indication of similar ridership, similar fare structures. It's also important to note there's a few, like Missoula is fare free. So, they don't check the box. So that's something that is a little different, but maybe we could look to them for what's successful in that methodology. Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yeah, so I think the answer was that they had a similar total dollar amount.
Yes.
Okay. And
Yep.
and so obviously Missoula fare free would be completely different, but I love having them in the group because that always intrigues me when I've been to places that have been fare free. That's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that as a visitor. Then my other question was or not question, but more maybe emphasis, because it's kind of near and dear to things we've been working on, is the developer partnership. So I'm excited to see Missoula has some information on that front. And I know we'll probably explore that more, even if these other cities don't have those things. I mean, it may be worth asking, other state agencies like Suntran in Tucson, have you explored this? Have you run into state roadblocks, all that kind of thing? So just want to emphasize that line. I'm excited to hear more about that as we move forward. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Absolutely. Yeah, that was an important part that came up in a service planning internal meeting. We're really interested in trying to find innovative funding mechanisms, innovative partnerships that have been in place. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Thank you.
I do not see any other hands at this time.
Awesome. Okay. Excellent. So next slide, please, Rhonda. So that's all I have on peer agencies at this time. We will be bringing them back for future reference and probably have some recommendations from those agencies as we move further into the Flagstaff in Motion process. Now for goals, objectives, and performance measures. So the goals and objectives are intended to reflect community values and board guidance for future transit investments. And then there's 2 purposes for the performance measures. One is for the Flagstaff in Motion, creation, of scenarios, being able to distinguish between scenarios, kind of like a score sheet of how well they move the needle towards our goals. And it's my hope that this will help us to prioritize service improvements that will be presented in the next months and future months. I think it's important before we see the shiny, fun new object, like, what are we trying to achieve? So that's a big part. And then the other purpose of the performance measures is if we were to implement these services, then we can measure success on how we're meeting those goals again. So kind of a twofold. And as I read through them, sometimes I'm like, how does this help us discern between scenarios, but it's still important for measuring success. So I guess I'm torn a little bit on some of these. So let's go through it. Next slide, please, Rhonda. So looking again on any feedback that the TAC has on the goals, the wording, the objectives, the performance measures. So it's all on the table. So number one, rider experience, and we do have 6 goals, so 1 slide per goal. And happy to answer any questions you have per goal. So rider experience, we're looking to continue and improve the efficiency and reliability of transit services. So, objectives, we're trying to have transit service that's competitive in travel times, trying to get those choice riders, right? Trying to get people out of their car into a bus. So travel time is a big component of that. Improving transit service frequency on high ridership routes, provide transit options that respond to community needs and improve transit amenities. We definitely heard in Fred Solip's report on the focus groups that there was aspects of, perception of safety. So how can our amenities help improve that, among other things, but that's just a factor there. So some ways that we suggest measuring this would be the % of trips arriving on time. So this would be more that measurement of success once we have the routes implemented. Average passengers per hour, that's something we, in the Flagstaff in Motion, we will have ridership estimates with the service scenarios. So we can kind of anticipate what those riders per hour are, should be. And then if it's implemented, we can compare, measuring success there. Number of rider complaints, comments, online app and ticket purchases, and amenities based on level of ridership activity at stops and track improvements. Yeah. So any comments on rider experience? Any of these make sense? Anything that we're missing?
This is Dave. I've got 2 or 3 comments on
Great.
this. One is grammatical. I don't think you need that comma in the goal statement. The other is on the being competitive in transit time savings. And I'm just trying to understand what that means, to be competitive in time savings. Are you saving more time than another mode? Are you saving more time than you used to? What does it mean to be competitive in travel time savings?
That's a good point. And maybe it is a wording issue, because what I think is meaningful is that travel time on a bus compared with other modes, trying to get people to take the bus. So how can we make routes and connections that have good travel times, comparable travel times? So maybe, that's where I took it to, but I agree the wording isn't quite getting us there.
Okay, so yeah, maybe work on that a little bit. And then the other comment is on the last one in terms of amenities per stop based on activity level. And that's kind of want to raise it's almost an equity issue. And it's one, and it was a comment that I read in the focus group report. It's like, well, why would you do that? You might do it, based on activity level because of finances, and you might, and if that's the case, then, I would say you make that explicit. Otherwise, here's, I don't know if it's a good analogy, but we have spent a lot of time talking about crossings and crossings based on warrants. And gosh, if there's only one person crossing to get to the transit stop, they still need to have it safe. So why not put in a full-fledged crossing for that one person?
Mhm.
Well, does that argument apply to amenities at a bus stop? Just because there's only one person, should they not enjoy comfort and convenience? Now, if you have financial reasons for limiting the distribution of amenities, then again, be explicit. Otherwise, I think we might want to rethink that that part of this measurement.
Very
Thank
good
you.
point. Very good point, Dave. And in our transit guidelines, ridership is just one measure that impacts what that amenity should be, is recommended. Others are like exposure to elements, or you're along a high-speed road, a lot of other factors. So I appreciate that. Maybe something that more reflects our transit guidelines and those various factors. And maybe we simply say, add a minute, I don't know, but I agree. I like that. Thank you.
Kevin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 points. First of all, picking up where Dave was talking about road crossings, I'm wondering if, I'm not sure about if this gets addressed in our first mile, last mile considerations. We do have a grant for that, and I would think crossings would be very much part of that. The second thing is a question on the percent of trips arriving on time to scheduled bus stop. In parentheses, you say not early and within 5 minutes after. I wonder how that works for connections between multiple bus routes. Because if you aren't early, you may miss that connection. I've had that experience personally.
Absolutely. Kevin, thank you for those comments. So first on the road crossings, and in our next goal, accessibility and mobility, we do include a number of bus stops with accessible connections to sidewalks and bike lanes. We do identify that those first and last mile connections are critical. So I appreciate that, and you're already reading my mind. Second, the early, the on time. So this is our organization, what would you call that? It's operation standard. So if a bus, I agree with what you're saying. So transfers are one thing. And if we're on, scheduling enough time for those transfers, I think is very important. And then second, making sure that our buses are reliable for those riding. So this is our policy, that's the word I'm looking for. If we have our schedules, our timetables, and being reliable to those timetables is important. So I agree with both of your points, and there is a bit of a rub when it comes to missing those connections, and if it's how can we improve those connections? I think overall is a big theme of this plan. I hope I addressed those questions. Thank you, Kevin.
You did. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jillian.
Yes, I just wanted to bring up about the amenities. I've noticed that bicycles at bus stops are often tied up to posts and other places, not bike racks. And I'm hoping that you can look at the proportion of bike racks at some of the bus stops, so that if there isn't one at one bus stop, this rider can go to another bus stop on that same route to tie up their bike. As I say, the comment is coming because I see a bike regularly tied to an electric pole down by me. And I'm thinking maybe observation should be made that is one stop where we need a bike rack. And I'm not proposing we have one at every stop, but we have alternate stops that a cyclist can come down from, maybe lives a mile or 2 miles away from the bus stop, can ride down and find a good place to put their bike on that particular route. That's what I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Excellent point. Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you, Jillian. And just a reminder for folks to put your hand down so that the next time you have a comment, I know that it's a new hand and not the same hand.
Right.
Okay, I don't see any other hands, so we'll keep going busy.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair. Next slide, please, Rhonda. So our second goal is accessibility and mobility. So we're looking to enhance accessibility and connectivity and continue to improve mobility through transit. So there's a lot of these words and they all kind of sound the same. And what I take is that accessibility is people's ability to catch the bus, so where the bus goes might be part of it. And then mobility is very much those first and last mile connections as well. So somebody's mobility may be really great. There might be awesome bike and sidewalks throughout the area, but if our goal is to access transit, mobility might be great for biking and walking, but it's limited for transit because of the accessibility to transit, the ability to access it. So I always kind of confuse these words and I try to keep that in mind. So with that in mind, draft objectives. So improving transit service coverage to better serve the residents. So thinking that access to areas, giving residents the option to access transit, providing access to employment opportunities through transit. So again, identify those employment centers, making sure that we have transit service in the area or connections to transit, that mobility component. Ensure safe and efficient connectivity of modes throughout the service area and improve pedestrian and bicycle connections to transit. And so we're hoping to measure this with percent of residents who live within a quarter mile from a transit stop. That's the industry standard for acceptable walking distance is quarter mile. We're also looking to measure the percent of jobs within a quarter mile from a transit stop, the number of major activity centers within a quarter mile of transit routes, and number of bus stops with accessible connections to sidewalks and bike lanes. Any comments or questions on this goal?
Not seeing any.
Great. Thank you. And I welcome any thoughts you may have.
Oh, wait. They were messing with me. So I don't know who's went up first, Dave or Jillian. So I'm going to go Jillian and then Dave, if that's okay.
I'm wondering why you have the word draft objectives. The word draft is in each one. The whole thing is proposed, so why is it a double? They're the only thing that are drafts, nothing else is?
Excellent point. No, I think it's all draft. I know it's all draft, and I think that you're onto something. Thank you, Jillian. I'll remove draft.
And Dave put his hand down, so either he doesn't have a question or he really just wants to mess with me today. Maybe both.
No, I have just a comment on the, thank you, Madam Chair. And if there's a chance to mess with you, I'll take it.
I know.
The objective on the access by bike and ped, I'm wondering if that needs, some kind of something similar to that quarter mile metric. If the,
measurable.
what are you actually looking at there? If it extends 10 feet from a bus stop, have you hit the mark? Or does it need to actually be connected to something or cover a certain distance? And maybe that's a target, but it just seems like there's, it's a pretty squishy measure without something like that.
Agreed. Thank you, Dave. Great. No other questions?
No, not yet.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Next slide, please, Rhonda. And if anyone has thoughts later, there is an attachment in your agenda with all of these. I welcome any additional thoughts that you may have. So our third goal is equity. Provide transit service for people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds. So our objectives for this is to provide transit service that accommodates ADA riders, improve access to transit for transit-dependent populations, and that would be measured by low-income, minority, car-free households, a variety of industry standards on that. Make concerted efforts to engage underrepresented communities in the decision-making process. We're looking to measure this through the number of paratransit free bus pass riders on fixed route. So if paratransit eligible and approved passenger at Mountain Line, they receive free passes to ride the fixed route. And so the use of these passes and locations of these passes. So number of free bus pass riders on fixed route, the percent of transit dependent residents living within a quarter mile of transit stops, and the number of essential services and grocery stores within a quarter mile of transit stops. So comments or questions?
I am not seeing any hands.
Great.
Oh, Jillian.
How do you measure transit dependent residents living?
Yeah, great question. So we take this from the American Communities Survey that's conducted through the federal government. And this identifies, if you're a car-free household, that would be an indicator. There's indicators. It's not a positive thing, but it's a propensity for being transit dependent. So car-free households, also low income and minority households. Those are indicators that they are transit dependent. So some of those overlapping components would be a transit dependent population.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, keep going, Busy.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Next slide, please, Rhonda. So this is goal 4 of 6. So we're halfway through. Sustainability. This is a big one, of course, for Flagstaff, and transit's a big part of that solution. So continue to provide attractive and convenient transit services to promote a healthier and more sustainable community. And our objectives are to encourage drivers to shift to transit to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to support the community's sustainability goals. And we're seeking to measure that through the mode share of residents who use transit. I know the MPO they have conducted in the past like a travel diary. We can look at that. We could also look at that American Community Survey data. So there's a couple ways that we could look at mode share of residents who use transit, and implement electrification of transit vehicle fleet. So that's part of our zero emission bus transition plan that was recently completed. And we have 2 electric buses coming in a few years. But so there's a few ways that we can measure this. Looking for any comments or questions on goal 4, sustainability.
Every time I say no, somebody then raises their hand. Oh, see, Jillian.
Excellent.
Would you try and remind me what has been our discussion about the trolley bus routes possible? I was reading in the paper today about an experiment in Germany to have trucks running along what we would call trolley routes with catenary wires along major roads. And it's just going through my mind. What have our discussions, could you just remind me, what have our discussions been on electrification using catenary wires, which would be on fixed routes, of course?
Thank you, Jillian. I'm not aware of actually looking at catenary wires for, a trolley system. Maybe Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, if this has been looked at in the past. It is not something that we are looking at as part of Flagstaff in Motion. We are looking at more of a bus-based system, maybe some microtransit in there. And our electric buses that we are proposing are battery electric buses. So we would charge them using our utility provider APS, and not the catenary wires. I think that would be so cool, but I don't know if Flagstaff's quite there yet.
Heather, has there been some discussion? Something is going through my head and we've had to talk but am I incorrect?
We have actually never talked about that as a solution, Jillian. We have talked about potential of light rail, not within the community, but community connecting to maybe the Grand Canyon and other communities. But that was, I think, that might be worth exploring discussion. I don't think it ever got past that. And we've always looked at bus rapid transit, like the model that's on campus in the community, but I'm not aware of a discussion about doing anything like trolleys and electrification in that manner.
Well, maybe it's something we could just throw in for discussion. I mean, it's intriguing if in Germany and the truck operators are planning to use trucks for this, because then there's no downtime for charging the electric battery.
Right.
That's one of the advantages. And apparently the trucks, they have on top of the cabs, they have the necessary equipment, and I can't remember the correct word, that they can just raise the equipment up, attach it to a catenary wire, use the electricity from it, and then when they come to the end of the wire, they lower what they're using and go back to diesel. It's in today's New York Times about the trucks. I thought it's very, very interesting. And I'm suddenly thinking, wow, if we could do that on the buses, that might be something innovative. But it's been tried in Germany right now. And the truck companies, the companies making the trucks, are doing the investments together with the government.
Thank you. I will definitely look into that. Thank you.
It's just intriguing. But I think it'd be interesting for the transit community in these small to be able to do it. It might not be, I don't know how expensive it is, but we're talking about a city, so it shouldn't be too bad to put up the wires, other than along a highway, which I imagine is expensive. Any case, end of subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian.
Keep going, Busy.
Thank you so much. Next slide, please, Rhonda. Goal 5 is investment. So integrating transit services with land use planning policies to support economic development and community growth. So our objectives are to improve transit service for areas with high ridership potential, and collaborate with the City of Flagstaff and developers on high density developments. And we're looking to measure this through ridership growth, the number of new developments within a quarter mile of transit stops, and the frequency of transit service to major activity centers and essential services. Comments or questions on this goal? I see a couple hands. Let's see, I think Gail's hand may have been up. Oh, sorry.
All right, didn't realize I was muted. Gail, then Dave, then Jillian.
Awesome. Busy, I have a question about how you're going to collaborate with the City of Flagstaff. And the reason I'm asking for the recommended performance measures is there is discussion among the development community about wanting to incorporate that, but how do we pay for it? So I'm just, are you thinking about, like, help me understand this recommended performance measures a little bit deeper.
Absolutely. So we have a few tactics. One is looking at those peer agencies and seeing best practices done elsewhere. So that's one. And then, working with the city and talking through, at least with the hospital, currently with the hospital, NIH moving out to Fort Tuthill, this is definitely a great pilot or practice ground, I think, as we talk with people on what makes sense for these developments. How do we achieve transit in to a critical destination, examples like that. So there's a few ways. We also have coordination meetings with city staff, county staff, so looking with planners, engineers, on how transit supportive policies in development could be helpful. For example, the permanent transit network that was identified in the 2017 5-year plan. I definitely heard from city long-range planners that's really helpful. That's the kind of thing we're looking for in more ways through this plan. And how can we support city and county to support transit, right? Working together. So coordination meetings like that, and then also coordination meetings with UGale and other economic development organizations, trying to get out to the businesses and trying to understand, again, these funding mechanisms. What makes sense? What partnerships make sense? What would that look like? So we don't have anything identified. It's very much a process that's within this Flagstaff in Motion to identify that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, a little bit. I think that there's such a demand, but I think that at some point we really need to dig a little deeper about how it's going to be funded, because employers want to partake, but the price tag to make it happen is so great that it kind of gets shoved to the back. So it's great that we track all of these things, but I was just kind of looking at how are we moving it forward? Anyway, sounds like it's a process. So thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just kind of stepping back to the bigger picture a little bit. This is, we're deep into the goals, and this is the first time frequency has been mentioned. Is there a shift going on here from a kind of a philosophical perspective?
Definitely, I see the Flagstaff in Motion plan building on the 2017 5-year plan, which identified frequency as, a top priority and very important to increase ridership. And in this plan, I think, that plan was like frequency. And absolutely, that's very important. And in this plan, we're looking to build on top of that. What kind of coverage can we improve? Is that microtransit? Is that fixed route? How can we get accessibility to transit routes? Maybe again, how do we get people in? So thinking like frequency is very important. And I think we kind of just we're taking the last plan that really focused on frequency and bringing that in. So I guess we already know that our core system, the frequency on our core system that we have today is so important. And then also important is how do we get people from outside areas that don't have service into that service area to have that core frequency where the main drivers of employers and residences, transit, ridership, propensity, having the frequency there. Does that answer your question?
Sorry, I'm shifting back and forth from mute and unmute. No.
You want to see frequency in more performance measures? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, it just, not necessarily. It just doesn't. I guess what I'm hearing is, we're going to do both. We're not going to emphasize frequency over coverage. We're going to, start trying to deliver on both. And, I think that just sets us up, not saying it's a bad thing, but sets us up for a lot of conversations on, what's that balance? Where do we increase frequency? Where are we going to extend coverage? Before it was a little clearer, frequency first. I just think it, just creates the need for a little more conversation. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, and Dave, on that point as well, Kate and I have talked quite a lot about, frequency and coverage are both important. And instead of having them, kind of battle, it's one or the other, it's which one is our focus. It seems more meaningful if we can find a way to, look at travel time. So what is, what's an individual in a, X location? How long does it take for them to get to this location? Like how far can they get in 10 minutes? How far can they get in 20 minutes? How far can they get in 30, 40, 60 minutes? How really understanding our service scenarios from a travel time. So that's like walking and biking and riding the transit, and so frequency comes in there, like that ability to connect between all of these modes. So I think that's more meaningful instead of, creating this, setting it up to be a competition or a conflict between frequency and coverage, because we do think that both are important. To your point, like, it seems like we're saying both are important. We're saying both are important. And so how do we have a metric that reflects that, mobility and accessibility for people's travel time on their trips? Does that help? I think that's where we're going. Okay. I think
Yeah, that's a little bit better, but it's
Okay.
still, there's limited resources, and so what I'm hearing is there's going to be perhaps a new metric that helps us determine how to distribute those resources.
Heather, your hand went up and then went down. Did you want to add anything before I move on to Jillian?
I think Busy covered it very well. The only thing that I would add is that I think we have to remember that we have not thrown out the permanent transit network. We have not thrown out the frequency that we committed to in 2017. I think this performance measure helps us get development and the community so that they're conscious and aware of where that permanent transit network is, and that we're impacting development to ensure that we aren't being asked to continue going outside of where we are, so that, Dave, yes, we can ensure that we're able to use those resources for frequency and keep access to transit services.
Thanks, Heather. Jillian.
I would just like to echo Dave on his concerns. And what has really caught me is the first objective: improve transit service for areas with high ridership potential. The word potential is a little unsettling for me personally. When we went for the last tax increase, the people who lived outside the city or in the areas further away from downtown did not support the tax. If you look at areas, just thinking what I consider high ridership potential and high density development of Zuni down below CCC, that's going to, you could say there's potential there, but I think you have to sell transit before you start taking it in. Yes, I agree, frequency needs to provide for supports transit, but we're talking about high ridership potential. I'm not sure high density alone is the criteria. It needs to be who's living there and will actually use it and doesn't have access to one car per person. So potential might be something which you see in data, but when you go out and walk around or meet with the people, it may not be there. So I'd like to see a little bit more understanding of what we mean by potential in high density developments. I think it needs analyzing a little bit more. They're just words. It looks like potential. I think it needs more analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. And to that point, I agree. Maybe the wording is not correct, because in my mind, I see high ridership potential being some of those factors for transit dependent populations talked about in a previous slide. So thinking low income, minority populations, car-free households, that would have the high ridership potential areas. So we're kind of hitting on things. I hear your concern, and maybe it's a wording choice. So I think clarification is needed in our wording there. Thank you for that.
Madam Chair, this is Dave. You used the word propensity to describe that before. That's a bit jargony, but maybe that's I don't know if that would make Jillian happier or not, but there's an alternative.
Thank you, David. Yes, it it gives more the propensity, gives the idea we're going to look into it rather than we do see the potential. I just want to be concerned because, again, going back, there are high density developments. And I think we need to be very careful about putting a bus there when there's usually one car per person. And the bus use might be just the odd resident every now and then.
Excellent point. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we move on from goal 5? Okay, go ahead, Busy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next slide, please, Rhonda. And I so appreciate everybody's comments and questions on this. We want something that works, and this is extremely helpful. So goal 6, living affordability. Continue to reduce the cost of living in Northern Arizona by providing affordable transportation options. So getting at that, household costs, there's rent, and then the second highest cost is transportation. So how do we as transportation providers help that affordability equation, reducing the cost for transportation? So our objectives are mitigate the rising cost of living by providing safe, affordable alternatives to car ownership, maintain affordable fares for persons with low incomes. And we're looking to measure that with our fare capping program available to persons living below local poverty level. And maybe that needs, a measure to it. I could see, what number of individuals maybe that are using the fare capping program. I wonder if we could track that. Another measure is percentage of household income that is spent on transportation. Any comments or questions?
Jillian, I wasn't sure if your hand is up to ask a question or if it was still up. Sorry. Okay, not up. Questions, comments, goal 6. Not seeing any.
Excellent. Next slide, please, Rhonda. I think that's it. Well, thanks for everybody's comments today. Again, if you have other comments, we do have all of these goals, objectives, and performance measures in your agenda as an attachment, and I welcome any comments that you may have. It's, again, everything is draft, as Jillian pointed out, everything is draft, so we're looking for comments on all of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Busy. Next item, FY 2020 Triennial Review Report. Heather.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Transit Advisory Committee. This will be very brief because I'm happy to report that our triennial review as completed by the Federal Transit Administration had 0 findings in the 16 areas that were reviewed over the last 18 months. As pointed out in the staff report, the review began with our submission of documents and a bunch of answers to questions in December of 2019. We were scheduled to do a site visit in April of 2020 that was delayed. They ended up doing a virtual site visit in the last week of June and the first week of July, in which many staff participated in interviews and provided clarification, and our review was closed. We are still waiting for the draft report, but FTA did participate in our exit interview, and both FTA and the reviewer confirmed that there are no findings or issues that we need to correct. Just as a side note, I've participated in the triennial reviews since 2002, and this is our first review with 0 findings or deficiencies. So very happy to provide this report to you and our board of directors.
That's awesome, Heather. Congratulations. I think I speak for everybody just saying that's amazing. You had you might have missed it there's lots of like celebratory hats and thumbs up and all sorts of congratulations from the committee members. So congratulations, that's amazing. That's awesome.
Thank you. I will share that with staff who really are the key players in making sure that these things pass.
Nice. Next item, FY22 meeting dates. Rhonda.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the TAC. Just one moment, let me get my video on. Okay. So we have a conflict with the board meeting in November. The As to ADOT annual conference is going to fall that week of our board meeting. And so we're just asking board members to, well, TAC and board members to review the calendar, see if you foresee any other conflicts, and look to change our board meeting perhaps to Monday, November 22nd from 10 to noon. And that is it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks, Rhonda. So as a reminder, we do not go into presentations for any of the progress reports. The progress reports include the campus bus storage facility update, the annual bus stop rehabilitation update, the downtown connection center update, the annual safety report, annual fleet report, 2020 annual cybersecurity report, the new real-time arrival app, and some, well, Heather will probably do some summary of events. Any questions or comments on any of the progress reports? Seeing none. Heather, do you have a summary of current events?
Sure, I have a couple of things that I can share with you, and I apologize we didn't get this out in the packet. Wanted to congratulate our facilities team. They have implemented a new lighting alert at our bus stops. If you drive down Solier, you'll probably see a couple of these, but basically when the passenger enters the waiting area of the shelter, it automatically lights an alert above the shelter that is a small red light to tell the bus driver that there is a passenger waiting, and we're finding it to be very effective at those stops where it's hard for us to see who is waiting. Marketing, Jackie and many of our staff members have participated in 6 back to school events. We were actually successful in selling 19 passes over those 6 events. In total, we currently have 61 K through 12 passes that have been sold to youth in our community, and 6 college passes for individuals at both CCC and NEU. We're very excited to see that engagement of those populations in our bus program. We also renewed the pass program with CCC that allows the students attending CCC that are eligible for financial aid to have bus passes at a discounted rate through CCC. We did relaunch our online reloading program for our monthly bus passes. Currently, we have no one that has participated in that program, but really we're introducing it as we sell passes. So as a rider buys a new pass, they're getting information on how to register that pass and to be able to reload that online in the future, negating the need for us to mail passes back and forth or the loss of those plastic cards. So we're pretty excited to see that program go live. Additionally, we'll be launching mobile ticketing on the 10th of August. That's been a heavy lift for our team. Drivers are completing training right now, and we'll be rolling that out soon, the 10th, very soon. Gillig was here in July. If you saw a bus driving around town that looked like an American flag, it was Gillig Manufacturing. They brought in a battery electric bus that we tested over 3 days on various routes in our community, and we were very impressed with how it performed. So we will start completing our purchasing documentation so that we can get a couple electric buses ordered and start that demonstration and implementation of our transition to zero emission buses. And then lastly, a couple of just good news pieces I'd like to share. We have 19 employees celebrating anniversaries between July and August, and I will send the current events with those photos and their service dates. We have 5 that are actually completing their first year of service with us. And so they joined at a very tough time in July of last year. And so we're very glad that they stayed with us and are still here. We have 1 employee completing 16 years. And actually that same employee has announced his retirement. So Robert Martinez, who may be in the training room with Rhonda, he helps with our TAC meetings, will be retiring later this month, and was instrumental in our implementation of our websites in 2006 and has been a key part of our IT team since then. So just a couple of quick announcements in that regard. And then I want to recognize Busy Collins and our planning team. They were awarded a best transportation plan by the Arizona Planning Association for the zero emission bus transition plan. So just a couple brief updates, and we'll send this current events out so that you can see the full gamut of other news from our staff.
Nice. Thank you, Heather. Congratulations, Busy and the team, and congratulations, Robert, on retiring. That's great. Those are wonderful updates. Any final comments or questions for the good of the order before we're ready to adjourn? Going once, going twice. No comment.